podcast you're about to listen to is from a book series on post-qualitative, new materialist and critical posthumanist research. I'm Karen Murris and chief editor of this new Routledge series. You can find it on the following website, www.postqualitativeresearch.com.
I mean, we are like a bag of rabid cats, aren't we? If that's not too much of a mixed metaphor. Putting us together for this is really a great achievement. Was it COVID that made us sort of grow it into an online presence thing? I
Yeah,
think
it
it probably
was.
wasn't it?
It was because I remember traveling down and I'd see you for supervision like around the same time and I'd come for this because it
Right,
was just so nice to be with other students and with academics, be part of a group instead of just like on your own.
right.
And then in COVID, it all went online,
Okay,
which meant then, of course, we became much bigger from
sure.
there weren't that many of us, were there? About maybe 10 at the most at one session. So it's always
hmm
different people.
hmm
Um, and then it went online. So obviously we attracted a wider, more members. But I
And
think certainly for me, like one of the main attractions was really the group. It was having
mm,
that chance
mm,
to join the group, to be introduced to different readings or to different I don't know, whatever they call themselves, scholars. Better edit that.
mm.
Because otherwise you're kind of just on your own. In my case, on my own, like across the country, not knowing anyone else doing a PhD. So that's
Mm.
really important. That actual, I can't think of the word. The like more than a group. I don't know.
More than a group.
More than a group.
Well, you could be Deleuzian and call it an assemblage,
No,
I
I was
suppose,
thinking
couldn't
assemblage is the best word. Because yeah, and that the leveling of hierarchy as well. You didn't go along and think, oh, I'm too scared to say anything or I look stupid. You knew that it was a safe environment and people would generally go with what you said and help develop it. They were
you?
genuinely interested in everyone's thoughts. So I think that's really important. In fact, the way the book came to light really was through that complete flexibility. There wasn't a sitting down and saying, well, we're going to write a book and it's this and this chapter and that chapter. It was a case of what do people want to offer? And it being able to embrace all the different takes on posthumanism and on adventuring.
It wasn't only us lot as a group, a collection, but I mean also the opportunities that we had to converse with, colleagues from all over the world, people like Erin, people like Sarah Truman, and so on. That also was a great opportunity, wasn't it? So yeah, I think it's been quite inspirational to be part of the group. It's been really, really, really good.
Talking to different contributors to the book, what always came through in those conversations was how much that group meant to them and how much it had, as Kath said, I think, kind of influenced their thinking and enabled them to think about the way they worked and the way they thought about their work very differently. And I do remember it being really challenging at the beginning. We were all really struggling with these ideas around posthumanism and decentering the human. There was a lot of tension and difficulty, and yet, we stayed very much supportive as a group, and enabled people to find their own ways of working with those very complex, very difficult concepts. And I think the book's a testament to that. It's a real collection of the different ways in which that group and those readings and those webinars worked on people in really exciting and generative ways.
I think that's really powerful, Helen. I totally agree with you. I mean, it's all right for bloody Deleuze and Guattari to talk about, philosophy as the free and wild creation of concepts, but to actually work with the concepts and make them work is a real challenge. And I think the Adventures group actually provided a safe space. Yeah, there was safety was nurtured, yeah, through our process, which enabled us to work with concepts that were new and that were in that newness were rich and creative and valuable for all of us to use. Yeah, so I think that's what you said is really important, and the group was important too.
definitely. I think in a way the way it somehow worked was that you weren't thinking, oh, I'm dealing with a new concept, or oh, I'm bringing a new concept in. It was just natural somehow, a natural process. So that lost the sort of fear around it. I think, I'm not sure if he's still there or not, but I think the fact that Edward has been so engaged is actually really worth a mention. I mean, you know, what have we got here? We've got a young man still at school joining in with Adventures in Posthumanism research group, and the way he's contributed has been just amazing. So yeah, I think we should
Well said, Mary.
for that fresh perspective on things. And
But again,
It's
it
up to you,
goes
Edward, to keep the group going in the future, okay?
I wonder, like, Claudia, if you wanted to say anything, because I know, you know, that you've been a long-standing member of the group, and the impact it had on your confidence and your writing was always felt like it was quite significant for you.
Absolutely, you know, for my own chapter, you know, the inspiration, yeah, it came from a seminar with Roseanne Reynolds, but it's mostly like the small, you know, the moments that Mary was talking about. It's just the little breaks of confidence that each one of you have given me throughout the journey to go and explore, because I was terrified. I am terrified of these concepts. And, you know, that's, as Mary said, am I doing it right? Am I doing this analysis or using this concept correctly, or does that make sense? And I think that's what I enjoyed the most while I was writing, is that I felt safe and I felt welcome, and I felt that people were listening and engaged in what I thought it was important, and I was trying to play with and adventuring with. The chapters changed my thinking, and, you know, the work with the group changed my thinking in that, you know, I was so terrified of using autoethnography, but that idea of decentering the human and looking beyond the human, it gave me so much freedom. And, you know, especially thinking about notions of vulnerability and agency and empowerment, it was refreshing. It just gave me a different perspective to look at things, and to just engage with different ways of seeing this autoethnographic method. So yeah, I'm grateful to the group for that confidence and patience and encouragement.
I mean, you've contributed so much as well over the years for us. I mean, I've been inspired by you, and you've been so open about your difficulties sometime, or your fear of engaging with it, and yet you always go ahead and do it, and you'd never know if you didn't say. I think, but I'm just thinking also about Claire. I mean, Claire, you've been in it for a few years now. Yeah, what the group's meant for you, if you'd like to say anything.
So I
Can't get out of it.
I joined during COVID when I was at Plymouth Marjon University doing my master's, and it was advised to me to join it, and I emailed and I crossed, and then I badgered Helen for ages and spoke to Helen online about a piece of work that she had done. And I've just been listening to, I guess, talking about out of kind of the chronology as well, just within the kind of the way that the group kind of events itself through things. I would think definitely within my thesis that's in writing, but across the pieces, that a lot of the writing that I'm doing and possibly other people have done or are doing wouldn't have been possible without this group. And I think that's really important, that the way that even kind of like under the grain, that it kind of infiltrates a difference to the way things are done, and in fact then bringing them into this doing. And although it's not quantifiable, I think it's changed a lot of the way that we write and we think, and also the way we collaborate, and the fact that we do collaborate and that we work together, rather than these very individual, kind of very academic, kind of neoliberal lines of attainment and achievement. I think is vastly important. I do think we underplay it a lot as well. That it's always been this way, we've always done it this way, when actually, in fact, it's been through a lot of hard work from, say, for example, yourselves and the group to keep it going, and then to keep moving ideas and thinking in within this space across many obstacles. So I think that was kind of like I wouldn't be able to write and think the way that I write and think, or that we write and think, if that wasn't for this group, most definitely. And I probably wouldn't be the parent that I am if it wasn't for this group. It just kind of infiltrates into a lot of different sort of realms of life. So thank you, sweet. So I reckon that, yeah, that's a kind of a monologue of gratitude, really, there. That's what that sounded like. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Maybe it is worth saying how, out of the group grew the Adventures in Posthumanism doctoral conference, and that space that was created for people who were still, very much thinking and writing their doctorates, and how unusual that space perhaps is, and how fruitful it has been for all of us to engage with that space, and like you say, Claudia, to hear each other talking about our work when we were still very, still grappling with it. We weren't presenting our, polished PhDs. We were presenting our thinking and our workings and our, and that for me was hugely valuable, to be able to again go back to feel safe enough to talk about things that I hadn't really even, kind of managed to grapple with myself, but to an audience that were in it with us and supportive of that. And, again, a huge opportunity to take our thinking and our writings forward through that yearly conference.
I'm not sure who used the phrase. I think it was Claudia in relation to Claire's presentation about having the courage to do things differently. And I think that, again, the group meetings offered the opportunity to do that. And I think also, I'm just thinking here about Manning and her concept of the parapedagogical. The university is in ruins. Yeah, the neoliberal university is in ruins. Neurotypicality really, really has to be challenged. And I feel in a way, and I don't want to be too grandiose about it, but I think the Adventures in Posthumanism group allowed us to engage in what Moten and Harney call study, a very simple word. But it allowed for neurodiversities, different ways of thinking and doing. And I think, we've got really, before we knew the concept of parapedagogical, we were kind of doing it. Yeah. And I think that was very cool. And, long may we continue to do so.
Yeah, I think that was really important, because it's not just sort of within Plymouth either. It's taken lines of flight, as Mary was talking about, across institutions, that doesn't really entangle the institutions, but entangles the people.
Sure.
So the papers and the conference bits and pieces and the collaborations that have come out of this have been truly international.
Yeah, sure.
And not through kind of those normal, kind of very cemented lines of institutional who I am and it's been crossed by ideas. And the hierarchy that was spoken into earlier has been completely missing within those lines. And that can also be seen in sort of things like, so Joanna's and Lewis's chapter as well. That for me feels very much in the spirit of that as well. I mean, that's different countries, different universities, and without that kind of relationship between supervisor and supervisee, it was fascinating to read.
I'm Kath Christie, and I would like to tell you what inspired me really to write the chapter, and that is the most important thing, is the group of people that have been posthuman adventuring with me. I completed, or rather I sort of completed my doctoral submissions, which was a project based in a rural community, and I was very interested in the young people's experiences of being in education. And I submitted my thesis and felt a deep sense of incompleteness which I know is very familiar in doctoral thesis submissions, but there was something really deep that I felt unmet. And I then joined up with this group of posthuman adventurers, and here was a space that I could think in ways that allowed me to access other parts of my thesis project. Let's call it data, but the stuff that had been collected or generated through my project. And I so enjoyed and was enriched by these experiences. And so it was great to have the opportunity to write about these in the chapter, which I've contributed here. So thinking and being and writing with this group of people gave me access to conceptual tools that allowed what I consider a much deeper, or certainly a different analysis of what had been traditionally generated qualitative material. And I have fundamentally changed my thinking, and I hope that my chapter will contribute to the change in thinking for others.
Hi, I'm Edward.
Hi, I'm Claire.
Our chapter 9, is a tale of galaxies and forgotten glasses, the many lives of pockets, educational lines of attainment, the line of sit up straight, line up class, the graded lines of assessment. The line to take when your teacher in front of your whole class tells you you can be nice when you try.
It was inspired by Erin Manning's seminar with the Adventures in Posthumanism group, talking about Out of the Clear.
As we started to talk about it, it expanded into a real life example, just like at school.
And situations we found ourselves in at conferences and classrooms and in curriculums, in what we read, the music we listen to and write, and what we think again.
I really enjoyed talking about my pocket with its list of endless substances. I found it fascinating to explore its possibilities and potentialities.
And it was really interesting to edit that section without disrupting Edward's flow of writing and his spelling and his grammar.
We'd like readers to come away with a sense of how we conform
to ideologies and society and education, and those small day-to-day moments that work in between what we're trying to be and what we are trying to become at the same time. Thank you.
But our piece was inspired by Erin Manning's presentation, whenever that was, 2 years ago. So, our work has come out of that. So there's going to be a bit of repetition with what Claire and Edward said, but I mean, that's okay, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't think it matters because
No.
I mean, what came out of it for us was so different.
I think I just wanted to say how much I absolutely loved writing with Helen and with Ken. We were inspired by Erin Manning's Out of the Clear webinar. But actually, I had a lot of anxieties along the way as to where was it going, what would we say, how would it turn out? And it was really not worth worrying about, because at the end of it, we kind of just went with each other's writing, inspired really by each other and following, well, not following, but creating our own lines of flight from where each other was going. I think at times we came together. And at other times we sort of went our different ways, but we always came back.
I concur with what Mary said. It was on two levels. I really enjoyed writing the chapter. It was, first of all, inspirational, as Mary said, working with Erin's concept of the clear and out of the clear. And I felt that collaborating with Helen and Mary was a really fruitful process, both in terms of the collaborative practices we engaged in, but also in actually taking Erin's practice of Erin's concept forward and kind of making our own concept of the clear through our writing. So yeah, I think it was there was no sense in which we were applying Erin's work, but it was a real inspiration to work with Mary and Helen in helping to develop the writing that we did for this chapter. Boom, boom.
I think what was most liberating about writing this chapter was the way in which it kind of emerged organically. So there was never a kind of plan or an idea of what we would write. And so the writing kind of just grew out of our own personal responses, but then the way in which we shared those with each other in a very kind of non-linear and very kind of spontaneous way. So there were periods where one of us might not be writing at all, and where another might be writing copious amounts, and yet somehow there still remained that connection between the three of us that enabled this piece of writing to just keep kind of generating more writing. And it was, like Ken said, we weren't writing to the concepts as much as kind of embodying them in our writing, which was very exciting, and quite I don't know, just a very different process to other collaborative pieces I think I've been involved in, where there would be maybe a clearer sense of who was contributing what and how. And the piece that you'll read in the book is very much a kind of snapshot of those writings. That's not all of the writings, but it's a sort of a window in on a process that we hadn't anticipated in advance of the writing.
When I knew we were making this podcast about the book, I got in touch with my co-author Lois Peach, who is in Australia at the moment, and Lois and I had written a piece together about intergenerational relations when Lois was doing her PhD, and I'm more of an academic elder, so quite a big age gap between us, but we came together to share our interests. And this very enjoyable process of collaboration is the focus of our chapter for the book. Lois said to me that she had really loved a piece I shared with her about women's chat and gossip, and how taking our conversations seriously is important. And this was work, in inverted commas, or it became work, but it was also joy and care and nurturing and noticing, other powerful qualities that are often deemed unimportant in women's work. And we've kind of tried to capture this in the abstract for our chapter about this concept of chit-chat, which is often regarded as an insignificant activity in research and in everyday life, on the frivolous side, or dismissed as mere chit-chat. The denigration of chat and small talk, particularly among women of the poor and the labouring classes, and we might add creatures such as birds, has been a means of dismissal, a marking of inferiority and unintelligibility, a practice for undermining solidarity. So our chapter is trying to make a case for chit-chat as an activity that matters, as an activity of knowledge-making, of co-creation and careful living.
My chapter, Notes on Disease and Death, is very different to the one that I'd originally planned. But the singularity of a life is such that events intervened. In this case, an illness that risked being terminal, followed some months later by the death of a very loved one. What appears on these pages now could be described as a freefall, produced at different points in time when I barely felt able to write, hence the allusion to diary entries in their titling. References were added retrospectively, to lend my writing an appearance of academic credibility. And doing so made me realise just how much certain texts, read long ago, had become a part of my everyday sense or truth-making. So the reference to de Beauvoir, read avidly 5 decades ago, amid numerous references to Deleuzean thought. I would very much like to thank the editors for supporting this change of direction at a time when I was doubtful that I would ever write again. Such is the power of grief that we will all experience someday, if not already, in a past present, as Deleuze might say. The text can be thought of as performative, in that it lays bare the solace to be found, that I found, in the natural world and in post-structuralist considerations of loss and death, within my own living universe, as Christeva might say. So I draw on Deleuze's concept of immanence, on Foucault's concept of the surveillance society, and thinking about identity, illness and death in my own truth-making at specific times. In this sense, I experienced my writing for this book as a sort of counter-conduct, as Foucault might say, or a reversal of dominant and cliched narratives around bereavement.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. If you would like to know more about this chapter, please visit the website